And so while lots of folks would talk around the table about sports or other things, my father made sure at some elements of our conversation were already around interest rates and CDs and investing. And he did it without having much money at all, so this was very practical. And the other thing that got me interested was he allowed me to start balancing the family checkbook at a relatively young age. So it was very sort of practical, hands-on financial literacy at home.
Well, that's an amazing story. I don't know how many fathers will do that.
Right.
But maybe you got a sense of, kind of a sense of beauty in the structure, right?
Oh, absolutely. I got a sense of a couple of things. One is that, finance is really interesting. Two, frankly, it really drives people's lives. The ability to, achieve your goals, to, bring your kids along, et cetera, in a modern society depends on financial well-being. And I also really had this point of view that it has something to do with everyone's life. It's not just for rich people, but moderate income people, low income people. Everybody needs to be involved in and hopefully benefit from finance. And that's one of the lessons that sort of seeped in my household.
It seems like your career is involved with I would say, the human side or the social side of finance. You were vice chairman of the Federal Reserve, and that puts you in a role of stabilizer and regulator.
Right.
And now you're working for a nonprofit, TIA, that is, it seems to have a strong social purpose.
Right. Well, look, because I firmly believe that the ultimate role of finance is to help people to achieve their dreams, and that's very social. As you point out. And the Federal Reserve was something I became interested in, again, at a young age, because Andrew Bremer was appointed to the Fed as the first black governor when I was 14 or 15. So that piqued my interest.
But you were following those things when you were 14.
Well, again, back to my father and the things that he would talk about.
Yeah.
But to your bigger point, absolutely. There are all sorts of elements around finance that folks don't often think about. And so creating a stable, well-regulated financial system, which is one of the things the Fed does, was very important. Actually, the Federal Reserve also is responsible for the payment systems of the U.S., pretty arcane activity, but pivotal to keeping the economy going. And then, as you say, I've come to TIA, and the role here at TIA is to help individuals in the not-for-profit sector to achieve financial well-being. We say we are created to serve and built to perform. And so it's very much in the social side of finance that I found my career.
Yeah, you're both working for a nonprofit and serving nonprofits.
Exactly right. And we say we're serving those who serve others. And we also say we basically do finance for people who have other things to worry about. And, all of these things sort of describe who we are. But the main point for TIAA is to get people safely to and through retirement. In a way that many others do not.
See, I think some of my students have the impression of finance that it's all about in and out, trading, and I won't tell you what I know because I don't want you to trade on it before me, and I don't know what you feel about it.
I think finance is much more than what's in the newspaper. Finance is much more than quick profits. It's much more than speculation. So what we do here at TIAA is long-term investing, and we do it for people who are giving us their life savings, so we have to do it with a really strong and heavy overlay of good risk management. And all of these things are an important part of finance that aren't the sort of the newspaper story around finance. Now, it's also true that part of finance is around trading, quick profit, but that's a subset. It's not the whole thing. And what I love about finance is that you really can use it for social purposes to help make people's lives better. Because all of us in a capitalist society live in a world in which finance is an important part of achieving overall well-being.
So, what do you think of millisecond trading?
I'm not terribly enthused about millisecond trading. The challenge there is that's really not about developing insights into what's likely to be a good investment. It's not really understanding the income statement and the balance sheet of a company. It's really, as you say, computer-driven, algorithmic trading, looking for minor imperfections in markets. Now, as an economist, you and I both know that we try to teach our students that markets bring into consideration all the available information in setting prices. So, millisecond trading, insofar as it maybe draws out small anomalies, perhaps that's an important role to play, but it's not the only role to play, and it certainly is not investing. It is really computer-driven, activity, looking for small incremental pennies to make, or less than a penny to make here and there.
Another subject. On your watch at the Federal Reserve, you experienced several financial crises. I'm thinking first the Asian financial crisis, then there was the 2000, 2001,
the
dot-com bubble, and then there was also 9/11, which I understand you had a very important role in managing.
Oh, so let me start with the backwards, if you will. So yes, I was the only governor in Washington on 9/11. As you know, the Federal Reserve is overseen by a board of governors. I was the vice chairman at that point. Chairman Greenspan was out of the country and out of touch for about 2 days, and all the other governors were out of the building. So it did fall to me to lead the initial response on 9/11. And there are 2 or 3 things that we immediately had to do. One was we issued a statement, very brief, that said the Federal Reserve is open and operating, and then in sort of technical language it said we provide all the liquidity that was called for to keep the system running. And then the second thing that we had to do was then keep up with our promise, and so we provided huge amounts of backstop liquidity for banks, for checks, etc., and that proved to be very helpful. And then the third thing we had to do was work with the banks to keep them, get them back to a state where they're operating smoothly.
So it could have been a lot worse.
Oh, it could have been much worse. The U.S. economy at that point was gradually coming out of the dot-com bubble and bust that had created a slowdown in the U.S. economy. We were already at the Fed keeping interest rates relatively low to allow the economy to heal from that. And so had the shock of 9/11 really reverberated, had not been a good shock absorber, I do fear the U.S. would have gone into a very, very deep recession. Fortunately, that did not occur. So it ended up that the team around the Fed did the right things. And the other crises that you talked about, the Asian crisis, the dot-com bubble and bust, they all really point out the important role that central banks can play, and it's become more visible, in cushioning these blows that occur periodically in capitalism. And the reason you need central banks is they act as the lender of last resort. They work hard to offset cycles by using their primary tool, which is interest rates. And all of that came into play around those crises that you're talking about.
But then I think it was just after you left the board and came to TIA that we had the even bigger crisis. Right. How did that affect you, or what was your role in dealing with that?
Well, as you say, by that point I had left the Fed, and when the 2008 crisis hit, I had just started working here at TIAA. And my most important goal then was to make sure that people's retirement incomes, the millions of Americans, 4 to 5 million who've saved with us, had a safe and secure retirement. And so we immediately, I joined here in April, and though I won't say I foresaw the crisis, things were starting to feel unbalanced. And so early on when I got here, we started to reduce costs. We reviewed our portfolio and made sure we had no material amounts of subprime in the portfolio, so we did that. And we went through 2008 basically trying to do 2 things simultaneously: reducing the risk in the portfolio, but also, frankly, because we have plenty of cash, looking for new opportunities to invest, knowing that markets would eventually right themselves, and we're also trying to find sort of relatively favorably priced assets that we could purchase. So it's an interesting balance of keeping costs down, managing down the risk in the portfolio while also looking for opportunities to invest wisely.
So some of your participants did suffer in this crisis.
Absolutely, because one of the products that we offer is basically a long-only equity kind of
Right.
investment called CREF, the College Retirement Equity Fund. We also offer mutual funds. And so there's no doubt that participants who were invested in equities saw the market decline. The good news, as you well know, is that markets since that time, equity markets in particular, have been rallying, have been going up in value. So
Right.
those that stayed invested and didn't sell at the low point have ended up doing quite well. They've more than made up for the losses. And so that's a real message about a long-term perspective and avoiding panic.
Right.
Everyone else is panicking.
So TIA offers help to investors and gets that message.
Absolutely. So we offer help in the form of our website. TIA has phone centers as many others. And importantly, we have well over 1,000 individuals out on campuses giving advice to everyone. And one of the big messages that we're trying to deliver during the most recent crisis, consistent with all the messages we deliver, is taking a long-term perspective, not panicking, and certainly don't sell into declining markets unless you really need the money. Now, easier said than done, but counseling and cautioning people to think about their longer term goals is a really important service that we offer here at TIAA.
So do you think the structure of our retirement funding industry is set and final, or what about people who are thinking of careers? What will it look like in 10 or 20 years? Will it be different?
I think the structure of at least the U.S. retirement system, but more broadly, will have to evolve. And the reason is that the private sector pensions that many of our parents knew growing up are really a thing of the past for most people. We also are discovering, as we sit here in 2016, that public sector pensions in the U.S., but in other countries, are under stress as well.
Yeah.
And so I think what we're going to see is, for a variety of reasons, retirement decisions are going to be pushed more and more to individuals. And that challenge is that many individuals, not just in the U.S., but around the world, are not very financially literate. And so those of us who are in the retirement space are going to have to continue to invest in financial literacy and advice for individuals, while also knowing that we have a broad obligation to manage their retirement money prudently over long periods of time. And I hope that the private sector really steps up to the challenge and does it the way that we here at TIAA do it.
Of course, not everyone is capable of understanding these subtle financial, and we care about everybody. There used to be a defined benefit pension that used to be more prominent.
Exactly.
Do you see any advantages in that, or in some kind
Well, I
of...
think there's some advantages in the defined benefit world, but I think it's a world that's behind us. The advantages were very much that the individuals didn't really have much to do with the decision making around their retirement. So what we need now is what TIAA does, which is a combination of defined benefit and defined contribution retirement, in which every individual contributes. Hopefully the employer matches the contribution.
Yeah.
We invest wisely in a well-diversified portfolio, and then we create lifetime income for individuals through our annuity products. And so I think you need all three. You need everyone participating and contributing with a match. You need good, solid, long-term investment performance with a diversified portfolio. And then you need the benefit component to be, a salary for life or lifetime income. And we offer all three of those things.
But there seems to be some public resistance, some psychological barrier toward even understanding annuities.
Right. And the reason that there is, here in the U.S., a psychological barrier to understanding annuities, as you point out, is that some annuity products, not ours, but others, are maybe too expensive. But I think there's a broader question, which is the industry needs to create products that respond to people's concerns. So one of the things that people are concerned about here in the U.S. around these annuities is that, what happens if I invest my money with you, give it to you, and you promise to give it back to me over life, but I had an unexpectedly early death. So, or what happens if I'm really interested in leaving a bequest for other people, leaving something. And so we have developed a number of annuity products that speak to these concerns. Because we want more and more people to annuitize, we want them to understand what the annuity offering is and to have an annuity that speaks to the psychological needs that people have. And so I'm cautiously optimistic that we will continue to see good developments in the annuity space that responds to these psychological needs.
So in some recent interviews of you, you have expressed skepticism about the secular stagnation theory. That seems to be a fundamentally important issue for the kind of business you do.
Right.
So secular stagnation is the idea that we're going to have zero interest rates, maybe high unemployment, maybe low growth for decades. And,
right.
What do you think?
Well, I am skeptical in part because the history of the idea of secular stagnation started not at Yale, but at Harvard with Alvin Hansen, as you know.
Right.
And he proposed that idea shortly after the end of the Second World War. Well, it turned out to not be accurate. And so one of the reasons I'm always skeptical about this theory is I think it underweights the ability of societies to grow, to evolve, etc. So as we sit here today, the U.S. economy and global economies are dealing with slow growth, low interest rates, but at least here in the U.S. we're finding sort of rising employment. So I think what we're actually dealing with is not secular stagnation, but what will be perhaps a long adjustment from the industrial world to a world that's more driven by technology and other things. And if you think about economic history in the U.S., we've gone through this before. We went from an agricultural economy to an industrial economy. It took a generation to sort of sort that out. And I think we're basically in a process of growing back to higher productivity, higher growth, but requires some adjustment. So I think that's really what's going on here. Now, it may take some time with low interest rates to make all that work, to be fair.
As a CEO of a fiduciary,
right.
You can't let your independent opinions dominate, right?
Correct.
And there are people who express different views
Absolutely.
about secular stagnation.
Absolutely true. People express different views. So my job is to think about how do I set the company up in case that is true,
Right.
versus other things. And so the way we've been thinking about this is to broaden the alternative investments that we have. So fixed income investments in a world of so-called secular stagnation are likely to have very low interest rates for a long time. So what we've been doing is also investing in different kinds of asset classes that might do well in different environments. We call that alternatives. So agriculture and timber and real estate